Hi guys, Michael, Elite CDL. We're going to go into a deeper dive into our pre-trip. We'd like to give you all our information. This is for our students, but everyone else as well. If you'd like to follow along, we're teaching the modernized method. Again, this may not compare to the old method. This is the modernized method, which is a little simpler and other things and other wording. So we're going to focus on that wording and the things that are on the modernized. Hi folks, Michael with Elite CDL. We're going to show you today how we do the in-cab inspection. This is the way that we teach our students. This is the modernized method. So if you're doing the old style method, it may not apply exactly, but this is the modernized method. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to check our seat belt. As you should always do first time you're in the cab is use your seat belt. We're checking for any frays, tears, anything worn or broken or damaged. We're going to make sure that it latches and that it unlatches properly. Also, if you have an examiner with you, you may ask him if he would like to buckle his seatbelt as well. From there, we're going to go into our air brake test, which is a 4-part air brake test. We use the Gale method. First thing we're going to do is a safe start, clutch in or in neutral. If you're in an automatic, you'll want to chalk your wheels. Check my ABS light. It came on and went back off. At this point, what I am listening for is the governor cutoff. The governor cutoff should happen somewhere between 120 and 140 psi. Idle this up just to get us there a little quicker. There's our governor cutoff. Now that we have our governor cutoff, we're going to go straight into our air brake test. We're going to turn the key off. Engine is off. We're going to put it into gear so that we don't roll off. We're going to turn the key back on in the on position. We see our gauges cycle. Now we know that our key is on and we can perform our air brake test. At this stage, with the Gale method, we've heard the governor cutoff. That brings us to the A, which is the applied. So we're going to charge the system with air. Once that's charged, we go straight into the applied, which is apply the brake. What we're going to listen for is for 1 minute, we're going to make sure we don't lose more than 4 psi. At my stopwatch, I would count this full 60 seconds. I would let my examiner know I did not lose more than 4 psi. Once I've completed that, we will go into the L, which is the low pressure indicator. We should have a light or buzzer or both. In this case, we should have a light come on and a buzzer. That should happen before 55 psi. There it is. It kicked in at 55 psi. So now that we have our low air indicator, light, and our buzzer, now we're going to go into our E, which is the emergency. These knobs should pop out before 20 psi, but not before 45 psi. So between 20 to 45 psi. There it is, popped out about 30 psi, both of our knobs. Now that we've completed our air brake test, we will start the vehicle to build the air. Performed a safe start, clutch in and in neutral. Again, if you were an automatic, it would be chocks in your wheels, which at this point you could go remove since we're through the air brake test. As our air builds, we're going to go through our in-cab inspection. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to go through our safety equipment. Our safety equipment is we want to check to make sure we have our spare fuses. We have those over here in the door of our truck in our particular vehicle. Also, we want to check that we have our 3 triangles. We should have those secured in a box on the floor or wherever you choose to
have yours, but you should have those 3 triangles. Also want to make sure that we have our fire extinguisher properly mounted and secured. It is a 10 BC fire extinguisher, fully charged, and it is secured with a pin at the handle. From there, now that we've built our air back up, we want to go into our in-cab inspection. I'm going to start and go left to right. So I'm going to start over here with my windows. Make sure that my windows, both windows, are not cracked, they're not damaged, and they're able to be seen through with no obstruction. Then I'm going to go to my traffic monitoring device, also known as mirrors. We're going to check and make sure that they're clean and clear of any obstruction, no illegal stickers. I want to make sure that they're not cracked, not broken. Make sure that they're properly adjusted to me. From there, that's going to take me around to my windshield. I'm going to check my windshield, make sure that it's not cracked or broken. It's properly mounted and secured. It has no illegal stickers. Then I want to check my wipers. I want to make sure that my wiper arms are not cracked, broke, bent. They're not missing. Make sure that my wiper blades themselves are not damaged. Make sure that the rubber is not weathered or torn. I also want to check and make sure that they make good contact with the glass and that they are in perfect working order. Then I want to check the spray and make sure that the windshield washer fluid sprays. We're good there. So from there, I want to check my dash lights. I'm going to check my left turn signal, right turn signal, as far as on the inside. We'll do that beforehand with the instructor on the external lights. But on the interior lights, we want to check our both indicators. We want to check our four ways. Four ways flashers are working in here. Also, we want to check our high beam. You see our high beam light works there. Make sure that our lights and running lights work, that they cycle through. We also want to check our heat. Our heat is working. We want to check our defrost. Defrost is working. From there, we are going to go into our tug test. So the first thing we're going to check is our trailer brake tug test, which means that our tractor brake will go in and our trailer brake will be out, which means the trailer brake will be applied. So the red out, yellow in. We're going to put it into first gear, give it a little tug. We know that our trailer brake works. Tractor brake out, trailer brake in. We're going to pull against it, make sure that our tractor brake works. Tractor brake works. Now we're going to press both of those in. We're going to check our service brake. The way that we check our service brake, we're going to go forward about 5 miles an hour. We're going to hold the steering wheel loosely and see if it pulls right or left when we apply the brake, which would indicate that our brakes are out of adjustment or suspension issues. Applied the brake, it didn't pull one way or the other. We know that our service brakes are good. Going to set our brake. Once you do this, do a final once over. Make sure that you hit all the things on your dash, your windows, your mirrors. Make sure that you hit your safety equipment. Go over your brake test in your head. Make sure that you've done it right. Your heater, your defrost, just everything in your mind, go over it, kind of check it off in a box before you tell your examiner you're done. In this case, we have done everything but our horns. We want to check our city horn. We want to check our air horn. Once you feel like that you have completed it all, checked all those boxes in your head, let your examiner know, I have now completed my in-cab inspection. So starting here at the front of the vehicle, we're going to start, number one, with an overview. We're going to check and make sure that we don't have any leans or leaks. The way that we check that, we look for the truck leaning one way or the other, indicating a suspension issue or possibly a steer tire being low. The other thing we're going to check for is leaks, which would include checking the ground, looking for any type of puddles or drips that could indicate a fluid, any type of leak of fluids. Then we're going to go into our LLR, which are our lights, lenses, and reflectors. We're going to check our headlights, make sure they're properly mounted and secured.
make sure that they're the correct color. In this case, we have our high beam, low beam, and we have our side marker and blinker indicator lights. Those are proper in color, which is amber. We're going to check our clearance lights, make sure that they're clean and clear of any obstruction, make sure they're properly mounted and secured. We're going to check our clearance lights on the trailer, make sure they're clean and clear of any obstruction, properly mounted and secured, and of proper color. The next section that we're going to come to is the engine compartment area. First thing that we want to check here is our fluids. So we have 3 fluids. We have our coolant, we have our oil, and we have our power steering reservoir. First off, we want to check our coolant. Make sure it's the proper color. Make sure that it's at the proper operating level. We want to make sure that our cap is in place, not missing, and properly tightened. Then we want to check our oil. To the examiner, you will want to tell them that our oil fill cap is in place, properly mounted and secured. It's not broken. It's not leaking. We will want to check our oil level. How we would do that, you don't have to physically do it, but you do have to explain to the examiner that you would pull the dipstick out, wipe it clean, put it in for a reading, pull it back out, and check that it is at the proper operating level. Replace your dipstick. That brings you to your last fluid, which is your power steering fluid. You want to make sure that it's the proper operating level. Make sure your reservoir box is properly mounted and secured and is not leaking any fluids. Once you've covered your 3 fluids, then you want to go into any leaks. So right now we're checking the engine, looking for any leaks of any fluids. So that includes looking for puddles underneath. We're looking along the engine, make sure that we don't see any leaks there, and also our transmission. Want to make sure we don't see any leaks there. Once we're done with that, that takes us to our steering system. When we go into our steering system, we want to check our steering column, make sure there's no more than 10 degrees of play. Check our steering gearbox. Want to make sure that it's properly mounted and secured to the frame and that it's not leaking any fluids. We want to check our 3-piece steering system here. We want to make sure that it's not bent, broken, it's not cracked or damaged in any way. We want to make sure that all of our joints are connected with castle bolts and secured with cotter pins, which is the case in this scenario. Also, we want to check our hoses. We want to make sure that our hoses are not leaking, they're not damaged in any way. That includes your hoses here. You want to check your air hoses and your fuel hoses. Anything that can leak fluid or air, you want to give a full overview. Let the examiner know that you're checking those hoses, looking and listening for leaks of any kind. Once you're done with those things, you want to move into the steering axle. So what we're going to check here, we're going to check our leaf spring. Make sure that there's not any missing, broke, and they're not shifted. Then we want to check our spring hangers. Make sure that they're not broken, they're not damaged. They're properly mounted and secured to the frame. Once we're done with that, that brings us to the brakes. We want to check our brakes, make sure that the brake shoes themselves are not worn dangerously thin, they have no contaminants. We want to check our brake drum, make sure that it's not broken, it's not damaged, it's not colored showing overheat. We want to make sure that there's no illegal welds. Once you've covered that, you want to do a full overview. At this point, I want you to go over everything. Make sure there's anything that you don't see that you may have missed and you're going over, because I always recommend a review. Once you feel like that you completed this review, come on over the tire. First thing we want to know about the tire is we want to know that there's no bumps or bulges, there's no damage to the sidewalls on either side. We want to make sure that the tire is evenly worn, they're both radials, and they're both of the same type of tire on the front. We want to make sure that our tire tread is at least 4/32 of an inch thick, deep here on all treads. Same on the back, that will be 2/32 for those measurements. Go ahead and mention that measurement to your examiner. Then that brings you around to your rim. You want to make sure that your rim properly mounted and secured and seated to the tire. You want to make sure that your valve stem, it's easily accessible. You want to make sure that it's not damaged or broken in any way. You want to make sure that the cap is in place, that it's not missing. And you want to make sure that you would check that air pressure with a tire gauge. You want to make sure that it's at least 100 psi. And you would check that with the tire gauge. Make sure that you mention that you would check it with a tire gauge. Then that brings us to our bolts. We want to make sure that our tire is properly mounted and secured to the steering axle. So that brings us to your bolts. We want to make sure that you don't see any indication of looseness, which would be any type of rust or new threads showing. And that completes our front section. All right, once you're to the side of the vehicle in this section, first thing that we're going to check is as you come to it, we're going to check our lenses and reflectors. We want to make sure that they're properly mounted and secured and they're the correct color, which in this case is amber because it's a side indicator. We also want to check our traffic monitoring devices, also known as mirrors. We want to make sure that they're properly mounted and secured, clean and clear of any obstruction, no illegal stickers. From there, that brings us to your fuel tank. Want to make sure that it's properly mounted and secured. It's not leaking any fluids, and the cap is tight, and it has a good seal, and it has your safety chain. You don't have to physically remove it, but you do need to mention that. If your vehicle has a DEF tank, DEF, you want to make sure that you mention the same thing for fuel as you would for the DEF. Once you're done with that, that brings us to our battery box. Want to make sure that our battery box is properly mounted and secured. In this case, we're not going to be able to take that apart, but we do have to know what we'd be checking for. We'd be checking to make sure the batteries are not damaged, they're not corroded, make sure that the wires are not broken or damaged in any way. We also want to check that there are the proper wiring. We want to make sure that the battery box itself is not damaged. We want to check, while we're here, we're going to check the frame. We'll make sure the frame is not bent, it's not broken, it's not damaged. There's no illegal welds here. While you're mentioning the frame, go ahead, take a look under the trailer. You want to let the examiner know that you don't see your frame on your trailer is good. It's not bent, it's not broken, and it's in good working order. From there, we're going to check all of our connections. We're going to check our air connections, both to and from the tractor to the trailer. You want to check your service line and your emergency line. Let them know that you're checking for proper connection and that you don't hear any leaks on these lines. The hoses are not worn, they're not frayed, they're not broken and damaged. We want to check our electrical line, make sure that we don't see anything, any broken pins. We want to check that it has its safety latch. We want to make sure that it's in good working order. Same thing on this side. You want to check your glad hands, both your emergency and your service. You want to check the seals. Make sure that the seals are in good working order. They're not weathered, torn, or broken. You want to make sure that they have good connection. You want to check your electrical line. Make sure that it's properly connected and secured. You want to check and see that there are no missing pins and it has good connection. And it does have the safety latch. That concludes this section. All right, in this section, we want to go over our combination part of the vehicle, in particular where the fifth wheel connects. First thing that we're going to check while you're here, you're going to check to make sure that your DOT tape is at least 50% coverage down the trailer, that it's clean and clear of any obstruction, and it doesn't have any dirt or grime on it, which would hinder the reflection of it. From there, we're going to go straight into the fifth wheel. You want to make sure that the fifth wheel is properly mounted and secured on the fifth wheel mounting brackets. You want to make sure that the mounting brackets are properly mounted and secured to the frame. We want to check that the fifth wheel has no cracks, breaks, or excessive damage. We want to make sure that we have no gap between the fifth wheel skid plate and the apron of the trailer. You want to check what's visible of the kingpin. Make sure that it has no damage. It's not broken. It's not excessively worn. We want to check our locking jaws and our locking mechanism. Make sure the handle is in the lock position and it's not damaged. We want to check that our locking jaws are properly secured around the kingpin and they're properly lubricated. We want to make sure that our fifth wheel skid plate is properly lubricated. From there, you want to check your clearance from your back of your truck, your tractor, to your landing gear. Make sure you have enough space to make your turns. With that, you want to check your landing gear. Brings you to your landing pads. Make sure that they're clean and clear of any obstructions, such as rock, dirt, debris, anything that can fall off. You want to make sure that's clean of any debris. We want to check and make sure that the supports, they're not bent, they're not broken, they're not damaged in any way. Make sure that your handle is in the stowed position and that it works properly. Then you want to make sure that it is in the raised position. And that completes this part. So when you're on the back of the trailer, there's very little, but do make sure you come to the back just to complete your full exam here. We want to make sure that our lights and lenses are not broken. They're all properly mounted and secured. We're going to check our indicators and our brake lights here, make sure they're the proper color. We want to check our clearance lights up top, make sure that none of those are broken, make sure they're properly mounted and secured to the truck. And that completes your full pre-trip.